안녕하세요.
The rainy night in Seoul seemed to reflect Han-soo, Min's exhaustion. The day at Kang Group had been intense, and she sighed as she checked the time. Once again, she was the last to leave the building. Working as the CEO Kang Ji, Hoon's secretary required absolute attention, and despite being a brilliant and intimidating man, he was also distant and cold. He barely acknowledged her existence outside working hours, or so she thought. Ji-hoon was in his spacious glass-walled office, reviewing documents, when he saw Soo-min through the divider. Her determination had always caught his attention, but today, he noticed something different. She looked exhausted, yet she still maintained impeccable posture. As he watched her adjust her bag and prepare to leave, his gaze lingered. A strange discomfort grew in his chest. It was rare for Ji-hoon to waste time observing someone, but there was something about her that made him momentarily forget the pressures of work and family. Soo-min pressed the elevator button, but it wouldn't move. She frowned and tried again, without success. That was when Ji-hoon's deep and authoritative voice sounded behind her, making her flinch slightly. "It's late. Why are you still here?" She turned around quickly, surprised to see him outside his office. It was rare for him to step out without a very specific reason. "I needed to finish some reports. I thought it would be best to get ahead so your meeting tomorrow wouldn't be delayed." Ji-hoon observed her for a moment, his dark eyes assessing her with interest. He didn't respond immediately, merely letting out a quiet sigh before saying, "Come with me, I'll give you a ride." Soo-min hesitated. "That's not necessary, sir. I can take a taxi." Ji-hoon's expression remained unchanged, but his tone became slightly impatient. "I don't like repeating myself, Soo-min. Come." Faced with his firmness, she had no choice but to follow him to the luxurious car waiting at the entrance. Ji-hoon opened the passenger door for her, an unexpectedly courteous gesture. The silence during the ride was thick, filled only by the sound of raindrops drumming against the glass. Soo-min kept her hands clasped in her lap, acutely aware of his presence beside her. After a few minutes, Ji-hoon broke the silence with an unexpected question. "Do you always dedicate yourself this much to work?" Soo-min lifted her gaze to him, slightly surprised by his curiosity. "I guess I'm just trying to keep my job." Ji-hoon turned slightly to face the road, but his expression revealed a hint of genuine interest. "It's not just that. There's something different about you." Soo-min averted her eyes, unsure of what to say. Her heart pounded faster than she would have liked to admit. Ji-hoon, the unattainable man, had just shown an interest that went beyond the professional. The car stopped in front of her apartment building. Ji-hoon remained seated for a moment, as if hesitating before speaking. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." Soo-min gave a small smile, murmuring a good night before stepping out of the car. As the door closed, Ji-hoon remained there, watching her enter the building. He should simply drive away, but something inside him refused to ignore that strange feeling. Leaning his head against the leather seat, he closed his eyes for a moment. Something had changed within him, something he didn't yet understand but couldn't ignore. Ji-hoon felt something strange for Soo-min, something he had never felt before. Monday started with an unusual buzz in the corridors of Kang Group. Han-Soo-min immediately noticed the curious glances and hushed whispers as soon as she stepped into the building. She frowned, an uneasy feeling growing inside her. Something was wrong. As she reached her desk, her colleague Minji rushed over. "You're in the news!" Soo-min blinked, confused. "What? What do you mean?" Minji pulled out her phone and showed her a picture. It was an image of her stepping out of Ji-hoon's car the night before. The headline left no room for innocent interpretations. The mysterious employee who stole CEO Kang Ji-hoon's heart. Soo-min's blood ran cold. "This is ridiculous. It's not like that at all." "It doesn't matter," Minji whispered, worried. "What matters is what people will think." Before she could respond, the elevator doors opened and Ji-hoon stepped out, accompanied by his personal assistant. He wore the same serious, unreadable expression as always, but when his eyes met hers, something flickered in them for an instant. Soo-min quickly averted her gaze, feeling her heart race. Throughout the day, she tried to ignore the stares and murmurs, but things took a turn for the worse. when she received an unexpected summons to the executive floor. Inside Ji Hoon's spacious office, she found not only him, but also his father, Kang Dae-hyun, the president of the conglomerate. The atmosphere was heavy. "This is unacceptable." Dae-hyun's voice echoed through the room. "An employee involved with my son? Do you have any idea what kind of damage this could do to the company's reputation?" Soo-min felt a chill run down her spine. "Chairman Kang, I assure you, nothing inappropriate happened. I only received a ride home." Dae-hyun let out a skeptical chuckle. "That doesn't matter. What matters is what people are saying." Jae-hoon remained silent, his eyes locked on her. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but firm. "Father, this has nothing to do with the company. I am free to make my own decisions." "You have a responsibility." Dae-hyun's tone sharpened. "And I will not allow a scandal like this to stain our family. This girl must be fired immediately." Soo-min's heart stopped for a second. The shock hit her instantly. But before she could react, Ji-hoon stood up. "That's not going to happen." There was defiance in his voice, something that made Dae-hyun frown. Soo-min looked between them, feeling trapped in a conflict she had never asked to be part of. Ji-hoon was willing to stand up to his father to protect her, but how far would he go? The tension hung in the air like a storm on the verge of breaking. Inside the luxurious office of Kang Group, Ji-hoon faced his father, one of the most influential men in the country, without showing any sign of backing down. Soo-min, still processing the president's words, felt her heart race. Being fired over a misunderstanding was unfair, but Ji-hoon was protecting her. Dae-hyun frowned, crossing his arms. "Do you think you can defy my decisions, Ji-hoon? Are you letting your position be tainted by a whim?" Ji-hoon remained firm. "This is not a whim. I am the CEO, and who works for this company is my decision." The president's gaze hardened. "If you continue with this attitude, you'll end up losing control of the company. Don't forget who truly runs things here." Soo-min watched the intense exchange between father and son, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. She didn't want to be the reason for a family conflict. Summoning her courage, she finally intervened. "Chairman Kang, I swear, I never intended to harm the company's image or the Kang family's reputation. If my presence here is a problem, I can leave." Ji-hoon immediately turned to her, his dark eyes narrowing. "You're not going anywhere." Dae-hyun let out a low, mocking laugh. "Look at this. My son, the CEO, defying my orders over an employee." He stepped closer to Ji-hoon and said in a cold tone, "If you continue down this path, don't be surprised when everything falls apart." With those words, the patriarch left the room, leaving behind a heavy silence. Soo-min felt her knees go weak. She wasn't sure whether to thank Jae-hoon or reprimand him for getting involved in something that could harm him. But before she could say anything, he sighed and looked directly at her. "Are you okay?" His voice held a gentleness that caught her off guard. Soo-min hesitated before answering. "I don't know. I don't think I've ever been the target of so much unwanted attention before." Ji-hoon ran a hand through his hair, something rare for him. "This will pass. But if you want to leave the company, I'll understand." She met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words. This was her chance to escape the chaos, but at the same time, she felt something growing inside her, something that made her want to stay. "I'll stay," she said, her voice steady. "I'm not the type to run away." For a brief moment, a nearly imperceptible smile appeared on Ji-hoon's lips. "Good." Soo-min's heart pounded. That small moment was enough to make her realize that something had changed between them. And maybe, despite all the obstacles, this was only the beginning of something greater. Despite the Kang family's opposition, Soo-min decides to stay at the company. But what consequences will this bring? The following days were a true test for Soo-min. The scandal surrounding her name continued to echo through the halls of Kang Group, and the judgmental stares from some co-workers weighed heavily on her. No matter how much she tried to focus, she knew that her continued presence at the company had made her a target for those who resented her. That afternoon, while reviewing documents in the marketing department, her supervisor called her in for a sudden meeting. When she stepped into the conference room, it wasn't just her boss waiting for her. Kang Soo-jin, the company's director and Ji-hoon's aunt, was also there. Her presence set off an immediate alarm in Su Min's mind. "Miss Han, let's be direct," Su Jin said, crossing her legs and observing her with sharp eyes. "The company is facing a public relations crisis because of you. Investors are questioning Ji Hoon's leadership stability. And do you know what that means?" Su Min swallowed hard. "Mrs. Kang, I never intended to cause trouble for the company. This is all just a misunderstanding. Maybe for you, but for us, every detail matters." "Su," Jin leaned forward, her voice carrying undeniable authority. "I am not as patient as my brother Su Min. And unlike Ji Hoon, I don't let emotions interfere with business. The best thing for everyone is for you to leave voluntarily before things get worse." Her words were as sharp as knives. Su Min felt the weight of the pressure, but she couldn't give in so easily. Before she could respond, the door suddenly swung open. Ji Hoon entered, his commanding presence filling the room. His cold gaze locked onto his aunt. "Aunt, are you making decisions for me now?" His voice was low, but it carried a warning tone. Su Jin raised an eyebrow. "I'm only protecting the company, Ji Hoon. Someone has to." He crossed his arms. "And you think forcing Su Min to leave will fix anything? That will only make our reputation worse." Then, turning to Su Min, he added, "No one will force you to do anything. If you want to stay, that's your choice." Something inside her solidified at those words. She wasn't weak. She wouldn't let them trample over her. Lifting her chin, Su Min took a deep breath and responded firmly, "I will stay." Su Jin watched the scene for a moment before letting out an exasperated sigh. "You're making a mistake, Ji Hoon. Don't place your trust in someone who could end up destroying everything you've built." With that, she stood up and left the room, leaving behind a thick silence. Ji Hoon turned to Su Min, and for a fleeting moment, his eyes reflected something she couldn't quite decipher. Something that sent a surprising warmth through her chest. With the powerful members of the Kang family turning against her, how far will Su Min go to stand by Ji Hoon's side? Su Min didn't know exactly when things between her and Ji Hoon had changed, but it was becoming increasingly clear that this wasn't just a CEO protecting an employee. The lingering glances, the silent conversations, the way he always seemed to appear at just the right moments, everything pointed to something more. But it also meant that the pressure on her was growing by the day. That night, after an intense day at the office, Su Min was walking absent-mindedly toward the bus stop when a sleek black car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down slowly, revealing Dae-hyun, the Kang family patriarch, his expression unyielding. "Get in, Miss Han. We need to talk." She hesitated, but she knew refusing wasn't an option. Swallowing hard, she stepped into the car. The silence inside was suffocating, but Dae-hyun didn't take long to speak. "Do you really think you can stay by my son's side without consequences?" His voice was cold, calculated. "You are not a Kang. You don't belong in our world." Su Min clenched her fists in her lap, trying to steady herself. "I never intended to cause trouble. I'm just doing my job." Dae-hyun let out a dry chuckle. "Your job? Do you think investors will trust an heir who can't separate emotions from business? Ji Hoon needs an appropriate wife, someone who will strengthen the family and the company. You will never be that person." Her heart tightened, but before she could respond, Dae-hyun pulled an envelope from his pocket and placed it on the seat between them. "This is a check, an amount that will ensure you never have to work again. Leave the company, disappear from my son's life, and you won't have to suffer the consequences." She stared at the envelope, the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. It would be so easy to accept and put an end to all this torment. But at the same time, she knew that what she had with Ji Hoon wasn't a mistake. And if she ran away now, she would be giving up on something that truly mattered. Taking a deep breath, Su Min picked up the envelope, opened it, and without hesitation tore the check into several pieces. "I am not a problem that can be solved with money, Mr. Kang. If Ji Hoon has to make a decision about who he wants to be with, then he should be the one to decide, not you." Dae-hyun narrowed his eyes, his gaze turning dangerously sharp. But before he could respond, Su Min opened the car door and stepped out, leaving behind not only the patriarch's offer, but also any lingering doubts within herself. After rejecting Dae-hyun's proposal, Soo-min is prepared to face the consequences, but is Ji-hoon ready to protect her from the next attack? That morning, Ji-hoon walked into the company with unwavering determination. He already knew about the conversation between his father and Soo-min. He had spent the entire night reflecting on what he should do, but deep down, his decision had already been made. He would not allow his family or anyone else to decide his future for him. As he walked through the hallways, he could feel the eyes of his employees on him. The scandal still echoed within the walls of Kang Group, but Ji-hoon didn't care. His fate was sealed. Entering the conference room, he found his father and his aunt, Kang Soo-jin, waiting. They had known he would come. "Ji-hoon, sit down," Da-hyun ordered, his expression grim. "You need to reconsider your priorities." Ji-hoon remained standing, his gaze steady on his father. "My priorities are clear. I love Soo-min, and I will not give up on her." Soo-jin sighed. "You are putting the entire family legacy at risk. The board has already started questioning your ability to lead. If my ability to lead is defined by who I love, then maybe it's the company that needs to change, not me." Dae-hyun scoffed, exasperated. "You are a king. You cannot act on emotion as if you were an ordinary man. And maybe that's exactly what I want to be, man who can choose his own path." Hoon took a deep breath before continuing. "If I have to give up my position to be with a woman I love, I will do so without hesitation." A heavy silence filled the room. Soo-jin exchanged a look with Dae-hyun. They realized that Ji-hoon was not bluffing. "Are your feelings for her truly that deep?" Dae-hyun asked, his voice less aggressive this time. "They are, and I would rather build something with her than live under rules I never chose." After a long sigh, Dae-hyun looked at his son with an unreadable expression. "Do whatever you want then, but remember, the weight of this decision will be yours alone." Ji-hoon didn't respond. He had known that for a long time. That afternoon, Ji-hoon went to Soo-min's apartment. When she opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise at the sight of him standing there, still in his suit, but with a soft smile on his lips. "What are you doing here?" she asked, confused. He took her hands firmly in his. "I chose you, Soo-min. Nothing else matters." Her eyes filled with tears. "But your family, your company?" "My company will still be there, but you are the one person I cannot lose. Let's build our future together." Soo-min smiled through her tears and embraced him tightly, feeling his heartbeat against hers. Months later, Ji-hoon and Soo-min's wedding was held in a beautiful garden. Though some members of high society still whispered about their union, those who truly mattered were there, celebrating with them. Dae-hyun watched from a distance, showing no emotion, but for the first time, Ji-hoon saw something different in his father's eyes, a faint trace of acceptance. As Ji-hoon and Soo-min exchanged vows, it was clear that their love had overcome every obstacle. And at the end of the night, as they danced under the soft garden lights, Ji-hoon leaned in and whispered into her ear, "This is just the first page of our story.